In different parts of the world, certain deaths have been officially closed as accidents, yet the details left behind tell a more uncertain story. Quiet inconsistencies, missing evidence, and unanswered timelines continue to raise concern years later. These are cases where conclusions were reached, but questions never stopped. In this video, we'll break down 5 unresolved deaths that were officially ruled as accidents. On January 31st, 2013, 21-year-old Elisa Lam, a Canadian student from Vancouver, arrived alone at the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. She was traveling through California, documenting her trip on a personal blog, where she described her experiences with a mix of curiosity and introspection. The Cecil Hotel, located on Main Street, had a long and troubled history, known for crime, long-term residents, and a reputation that had persisted for decades. Lam was assigned a shared room at first, but after complaints from her roommates about her unusual behavior, she was moved to a private room. Staff later noted that she appeared polite but distant, often seen alone. On February 1st, she was last seen by hotel employees in the lobby. After that, she disappeared without any immediate signs of distress or struggle. Her parents reported her missing on February 5th after she failed to check in as scheduled, prompting the Los Angeles Police Department to begin a search of the hotel and surrounding area. Surveillance footage from inside one of the hotel's elevators, dated February 1st, soon became central to the case. The video showed Lam entering the elevator, pressing multiple floor buttons, and then behaving in a manner that investigators later described as unusual. She stepped in and out repeatedly, appeared to hide in a corner, and gestured with her hands as if interacting with someone who was not visible on camera. At one point, she stood just outside the elevator doors, moving her arms in slow, deliberate motions before stepping back inside. The elevator doors remained open longer than expected during this sequence, though later analysis suggested this could have been due to a door hold function activated by one of the buttons. The footage was released to the public on February 14th in hopes of generating leads, but instead it raised more questions than answers. There was no evidence of another person entering or exiting the elevator during that time, and no clear explanation for her behavior was established. As the search continued, hotel guests began complaining about low water pressure and an unusual taste and color in the tap water. On February 19th, a hotel maintenance worker was sent to inspect the water tanks located on the roof of the building. The rooftop was accessible only through locked doors and a security alarm system, according to hotel management, though reports later suggested there were potential ways to bypass these barriers. When the worker opened one of the large cylindrical tanks, he discovered Lam's body floating inside. She was found naked with her clothing, watch, and room key recovered from the water alongside her. The tanks themselves were approximately 8 feet tall and required either a ladder or significant effort to access. The lids were not secured with locks but were heavy and designed to remain closed. The discovery immediately shifted the investigation. An autopsy conducted by the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office listed the cause of death as accidental drowning, with bipolar disorder noted as a significant factor. Toxicology reports indicated that Lam had taken some of her prescribed medications, though not all were present in therapeutic levels, raising the possibility of noncompliance. There was no evidence of alcohol or illicit drugs in her system, and no signs of physical trauma or sexual assault. Despite the official ruling, several aspects of the case remained unclear. The question of how Lam accessed the roof without triggering alarms or being noticed by staff was never fully resolved. The hotel's security measures were described inconsistently in different reports, with some employees stating that alarms would have been activated if doors were opened, while others suggested that access points were not always secured. The logistics of Lam entering the water tank also raised concerns. Investigators did not determine whether she entered the tank voluntarily or by accident, and no definitive explanation was given for how she managed to close the lid behind her, if it was indeed closed at the time of discovery, as some accounts conflicted on this detail. The elevator footage continued to draw attention, both from the public and from analysts attempting to interpret her behavior. Some suggested that her actions could be explained by a mental health episode, possibly exacerbated by stress or medication irregularities. Others noted that the footage had been edited before release, with certain segments removed and the timestamp altered slightly, though authorities stated this was done to protect the integrity of the investigation. No additional video evidence was made public showing her movements after leaving the elevator. Phone records, witness statements, and hotel logs did not provide a clear timeline of her final hours. The case was officially closed with the conclusion of accidental drowning, yet it left behind a sequence of events that did not align neatly. The absence of clear surveillance beyond the elevator, the uncertainty surrounding roof access, and the unexplained context of her behavior in the final known footage all remained unresolved elements. Elisa Lam was buried in Canada, and her case continues to be referenced in discussions about investigative gaps and the limits of official conclusions. The final report offered a cause of death, but not a complete account of how those final moments unfolded. In late January 1959, a group of 9 experienced hikers set out on a skiing expedition across the northern Ural Mountains in the Soviet Union. The group was led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, a radio engineering student at the Ural Polytechnic Institute. All members were considered skilled and certified for long-distance winter travel. Their route aimed to reach Otterton, a remote mountain whose name in the local Mansi language roughly translates to "don't go there," though the phrase was not uncommon for difficult terrain. The hikers departed from the last inhabited settlement, Vijay, on January 27th, documenting their progress with photographs and journal entries. Weather conditions were harsh but expected for the region, with heavy snow and sub-zero temperatures. On February 1st, they diverted from their planned path and began ascending the eastern slope of Kholat Syakhl, a mountain whose name translates to Mountain of the Dead. That evening, they set up camp on the exposed slope, rather than descending into a nearby forested area that would have offered more shelter. It was the last confirmed location of the group while alive. When the hikers failed to return by their expected date, concern grew among relatives and university officials. A search operation began on February 20th, involving volunteers, students, and later military personnel. 6 days later, searchers located the group's tent, partially buried in snow on the slope of Kholat Syakhl. The condition of the tent immediately raised concern. It had been cut open from the inside with large slashes running through the fabric, suggesting that the occupants had exited in haste rather than through the entrance. Personal belongings, including boots, heavy coats, and supplies, were left behind. Footprints leading away from the tent were visible in the snow, indicating that several individuals had left barefoot or wearing only socks. The tracks continued for approximately 1 mile down the slope toward a wooded area at the edge of a ravine. There were no signs of a struggle at the campsite. The first 2 bodies were discovered beneath a large cedar tree near a small fire pit. They were identified as Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonoshenko. Both were found without shoes, wearing minimal clothing, and showed signs of severe hypothermia. Burn marks were observed on their hands and feet, consistent with attempts to stay warm near the fire. Broken branches up to several meters high suggested that one or both men had climbed the tree, possibly to look back toward the tent. Over the following days, 3 more bodies were found between the cedar tree and the original campsite. These were identified as Igor Dyatlov, Zinaida Kolmogorova, and Rustem Slobodin. Their positions indicated they had been attempting to return to the tent. Slobodin had a small fracture in his skull, though it was not considered fatal. The remaining 4 hikers were not located until May, when the snow began to melt and search teams expanded their efforts into the nearby ravine. Their bodies were found under several feet of snow, in a deeper part of the forest. These individuals were identified as Lyudmila Dubinina, Alexander Zolotaryov, Nikolai Thibaut Brignol, and Semyon Zolotaryov. Unlike the others, their injuries were more severe. Dubinina and Zolotaryov had multiple rib fractures, while Thibaut Brignol had a significant skull fracture. Medical examiners noted that the force required to cause such injuries was comparable to that of a car accident. Yet there were no external wounds consistent with blunt force trauma from a weapon or fall onto sharp objects. Dubinina was also missing her tongue, eyes, and parts of her lips, though investigators later suggested this could have been the result of post-mortem decomposition and scavenging. Another detail noted in official reports was the presence of unusual levels of radiation on some of the victims' clothing, particularly those belonging to Zolotaryov and Dubinina. The source of this contamination was not clearly identified in the initial investigation. Some members of the group had previously worked in environments where low-level radiation exposure was possible, though no definitive link was established. The final photographs taken by the group showed no signs of distress. Their journals described routine travel, minor delays due to weather, and normal interactions among members. There was no indication of internal conflict or external threat in their recorded entries. The official Soviet investigation concluded in May 1959 with the statement that the hikers died as a result of a compelling natural force. No further clarification was provided, and the case was closed without identifying a specific cause. On August 23, 2010, officers from the Metropolitan Police forced entry into a top-floor apartment at 36 Alderney Street in Pimlico, London, after concerns were raised about the occupant's prolonged absence. Inside, they found the decomposing body of 31-year-old Gareth Williams, a mathematician and cryptography expert employed by the Government Communications Headquarters, commonly known as GCHQ. Williams had been seconded to the Secret Intelligence Service, ENOMI-6, and was described by colleagues as highly intelligent, private, and intensely focused on his work. He had last been seen alive on August 15th. The discovery inside the apartment would quickly become one of the most unusual and debated death investigations in modern British history. Williams's body was found inside a large red North Face duffel bag, positioned in the bathtub. The bag was secured with a small padlock from the outside. There were no signs of forced entry into the apartment, no immediate evidence of a struggle, and no indication that another person had been present. The windows were closed, the front door was locked, and keys were found inside. The heating had been turned up, which likely accelerated the decomposition process and complicated forensic analysis. The initial question facing investigators was direct but difficult. How did Williams end up inside a locked bag with no apparent assistance? A post-mortem examination determined that the exact cause of death could not be established. There were no signs of trauma, no fractures, and no clear indication of poisoning. Toxicology reports did not reveal lethal substances. Due to the advanced state of decomposition, some lines of inquiry were limited. Early speculation considered the possibility of accidental death related to a form of self-restraint or confinement practice, though no definitive evidence supported this conclusion. Police later conducted controlled experiments to determine whether a person of Williams' size could have entered the bag and locked it from the inside. The results were inconsistent. In at least one reconstruction, it was concluded that it would be extremely difficult, if not impossible, for a person to secure the padlock once inside without external help. This finding was not universally accepted, and alternative demonstrations suggested it could be physically possible under certain conditions. The apartment itself presented additional anomalies. Williams was known to be meticulous and orderly, yet investigators noted that the property appeared unusually clean, with minimal personal clutter. Fingerprints recovered from inside the apartment were limited and did not clearly indicate the presence of others, though the lack of prints also raised questions about whether surfaces had been wiped. CCTV footage from the surrounding area did not show any suspicious individuals entering or leaving the building in the days leading up to the discovery. However, the building's coverage was not comprehensive, and blind spots remained. Another element that drew attention was Williams's professional background. As a codebreaker working with sensitive intelligence, his assignments were not publicly detailed. Reports indicated that he had been involved in work related to international security and financial tracking, though specific projects were not disclosed. His family later stated that he had not expressed any concerns for his safety and had appeared normal in recent communications. In the weeks before his death, Williams had made several online purchases of women's clothing and wigs, which were found in the apartment. Investigators considered whether this suggested a private lifestyle that had not been widely known, though there was no direct evidence linking these items to the circumstances of his death. In December 2010, the Metropolitan Police publicly stated that there was no evidence of foul play, and the case was initially treated as unexplained. A formal inquest was opened in 2012, presided over by coroner Fiona Wilcox. After reviewing forensic evidence, expert testimony, and investigative findings, Wilcox concluded that it was unlikely that Williams had locked himself inside the bag and that the possibility of third-party involvement could not be excluded. She issued a narrative verdict, stating that the cause of death was unnatural and likely criminally mediated, though no suspect was identified. This conclusion conflicted with earlier police statements and added further complexity to the case. Despite extensive investigation, including international cooperation and intelligence review, no charges were ever brought. The lack of definitive forensic evidence, combined with the unusual nature of the scene, left multiple interpretations open. In 2013, the Metropolitan Police formally apologized to Williams' family for initial investigative shortcomings, including delays in discovering the body and failures in early evidence handling. The apartment was eventually released, and the case remained open in principle, though no new leads have been publicly confirmed. Gareth Williams was buried in his hometown of Valley Anglesey in Wales. His death continues to be referenced in discussions about unexplained fatalities involving individuals connected to sensitive government work. The central detail remains unchanged. A highly trained mathematician was found inside a locked bag in his own apartment, with no clear explanation of how he got there or why. On the morning of January 11, 2013, students at Lowndes High School in Valdosta, Georgia, began their day as usual, moving between classes and gathering in the gymnasium. At approximately 10:30 a.m., a group of students entered the old gym to retrieve a pair of shoes stored inside a rolled wrestling mat. The school allowed athletes to keep personal belongings in these mats, which were stored upright against the wall. As one student looked down into the center of a mat, he noticed what appeared to be a pair of feet. School officials were alerted, and within minutes, staff confirmed that a body was lodged headfirst inside the mat. The student was identified as 17-year-old Kendrick Johnson, a member of the school's football team. Emergency responders arrived shortly after, but Johnson was pronounced dead at the scene. His body was positioned vertically, with his head at the bottom of the mat and his feet facing upward, tightly compressed within the narrow space. Initial observations suggested no obvious signs of external trauma. The scene was quickly secured, and the Lowndes County Sheriff's Office began an investigation. According to early reports, Johnson had last been seen the previous day, January 10th, during school hours. Surveillance footage from the gym showed him entering the area alone at approximately 1:28 p.m. The cameras did not capture the exact moment he approached the mats, but no footage showed him leaving the gym afterward. Investigators reconstructed a timeline based on available video, concluding that Johnson had likely gone to retrieve a pair of sneakers stored inside one of the mats during a break between classes. It was a common practice among students, and the mats, though heavy, were often used as informal storage spaces. Authorities proposed that Johnson may have jumped or leaned into the mat to reach his shoes, lost his grip, and became trapped upside down. Due to the tight compression and lack of space to maneuver, they suggested he was unable to free himself and died from positional asphyxia. On January 24, 2013, the Lowndes County coroner officially ruled the death accidental. The report stated that Johnson's position would have prevented normal breathing over time, leading to suffocation. However, from the early stages of the investigation, questions began to emerge. Johnson's family disputed the findings, pointing to details they believed were inconsistent with an accidental scenario. One of the primary concerns was the lack of visible distress signals. There were no signs of disruption in the surrounding area, no evidence that the mat had been knocked over, and no clear indication that Johnson had attempted to call for help. The gym was occupied by other students during portions of the day, yet no one reported hearing cries or unusual noises. The tightness of the mat also raised questions. Photographs from the scene showed Johnson's body compressed within the rolled padding, with limited space around him. Critics of the official conclusion argued that it would have been difficult for him to enter that position without assistance, or at least without causing noticeable movement in the mat itself. In the months that followed, the case gained national attention. An independent autopsy commissioned by Johnson's family was conducted by forensic pathologist Dr. William Anderson. This second examination reported blunt force trauma to the neck and suggested that the cause of death was not consistent with positional asphyxia. The findings contradicted the original autopsy, leading to increased scrutiny of the investigation. A third autopsy, later performed by another forensic expert, again listed the cause of death as positional asphyxia, further complicating the medical conclusions. Surveillance footage from the school became another focal point. While authorities maintained that the available video supported their timeline, Johnson's family and independent reviewers noted gaps in the recordings. Some portions of footage were missing or had been overwritten due to the system's recording cycle. Investigators stated that no footage showed any other individuals entering the gym in a way that would suggest involvement, but the incomplete nature of the recordings left room for uncertainty. In 2013, the U.S. Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation reviewed the case after requests from the family. After examining the available evidence, federal authorities announced in 2016 that they would not pursue criminal charges, citing insufficient evidence of foul play. The Lowndes County Sheriff's Office maintained its original conclusion, closing the case as an accidental death. Despite this, the Johnson family continued to challenge the findings through legal action and public advocacy. They raised concerns about the handling of evidence, inconsistencies in witness statements, and the absence of a fully documented timeline of Johnson's final minutes. The case remained a subject of ongoing dispute, with differing interpretations of both the physical evidence and investigative process. Kendrick Johnson was buried in Valdosta, and his death continues to be referenced in discussions about contested forensic conclusions and unresolved questions in school-related incidents. The central image remains difficult to reconcile. A teenager found alone inside a rolled mat, in a position that suggests both accident and uncertainty, with no definitive account of how those final moments unfolded. On the morning of July 13, 2011, emergency responders were called to a historic mansion in Coronado, California, after a 911 call reported a woman hanging from an exterior balcony. The property, known as the Spreckles Mansion, belonged to pharmaceutical executive Jonah Shacknai. The woman was identified as 32-year-old Rebecca Zahau, Shacknai's girlfriend, who had been staying at the residence for several days. When deputies arrived, they found Zahau suspended from a second-floor balcony by a rope tied around her neck. Her hands were bound behind her back, her ankles were loosely tied, and she was completely unclothed. A message had been painted in black paint on a door inside the room, reading, "She saved him, can you save her?" The phrase appeared hurried, written in uneven lettering. The scene immediately raised questions about whether Zahau's death had been self-inflicted or the result of another person's actions. Just 2 days earlier, on July 11th, Shacknai's 6-year-old son, Max, had suffered a severe fall inside the mansion. According to initial reports, the child fell from a second-floor staircase landing, sustaining critical injuries. Zahau had been the only adult present in the home at the time. She called 911 and Max was transported to the hospital in critical condition. His condition deteriorated over the following days. By July 13th, he was declared brain dead. Investigators would later note that Zahau had been under significant emotional strain during this period, remaining at the house while Shacknai traveled between San Diego and the hospital. On the night of July 12th, Zahau exchanged text messages with family members, expressing concern about the child's condition, but not indicating any immediate distress. That same evening, Shacknai's brother, Adam Shacknai, arrived at the mansion to provide support. He later stated that he had dinner, watched television, and then went to bed in a separate guest house on the property. According to his account, he did not see Zahau that night. The following morning, he discovered her body hanging from the balcony and called 911. During the call, he stated that he had cut her down after finding her. When investigators examined the scene, they noted that the rope used in the hanging had been taken from a boat docked at the property. Knots in the rope were described as complex, but not beyond the capability of an average person. The bindings on Zahau's wrists were loose enough that some investigators believed they could have been self-applied, though others questioned whether it would have been practical to tie one's own hands behind the back in that manner. The message on the door added another layer of uncertainty. It was unclear whether Zahau had written it herself, and if so, under what circumstances. The black paint used was found in the room, along with a brush. No clear fingerprints were recovered from the writing. The San Diego County Sheriff's Department conducted an extensive investigation, including forensic analysis, scene reconstruction, and interviews with individuals connected to the case. In 2012, the department officially ruled Zahau's death a suicide. The conclusion was based on a combination of physical evidence, the absence of signs of forced entry, and the belief that Zahau had been emotionally affected by the child's accident. The medical examiner determined that the cause of death was hanging, with no evidence of sexual assault or defensive injuries. Despite this ruling, several aspects of the case remained contested. Zahao's family publicly rejected the conclusion, arguing that the physical evidence did not support the idea of suicide. They pointed to the bindings, the nudity, and the message on the door as elements inconsistent with self-inflicted death. Independent forensic experts hired by the family raised concerns about the feasibility of Zahao binding herself and then climbing over the balcony in a controlled manner. Questions were also raised about the timeline of events during the night. While Adam Shaknai stated that he had been asleep in the guest house, there were no independent witnesses to confirm his movements. Phone records and digital evidence did not establish a definitive sequence of events in the hours leading up to Zahao's death. The investigation did not uncover clear evidence placing another individual at the scene during that time, but it also did not fully reconstruct Zahao's actions after her last known communications. In 2013, Zahao's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Adam Shaknai, alleging that he was responsible for her death. The case went to civil trial in 2017. After reviewing evidence and testimony, a jury found Adam Shaknai liable for Zahao's death, awarding the family over $5 million in damages. The verdict did not carry criminal consequences, but introduced a formal contradiction to the original ruling. Adam Shaknai denied all allegations and maintained that he had no involvement. The sheriff's department did not reopen the criminal investigation following the civil verdict. Rebecca Zahao was buried in her hometown in Missouri. The events at the Spreckles mansion remain difficult to reconcile. A woman was found hanging under conditions that suggested both control and complexity, with physical details that did not fully align with a straightforward conclusion. The official ruling remains suicide, but the sequence of actions required to produce the scene has never been clearly demonstrated or universally accepted. Thank you for staying until the end, where the edges of truth remain blurred and quiet. Fragments of forgotten events continue to exist in the shadows, waiting in silence for time to reveal what was never fully understood.